Hello everybody. Welcome back again to part 2 with Chris Faverino, where we talk about his journey into the occult. I think there's some stuff about black holes, drawing parallels between other religions, and DMT, doing crazy amounts of DMT. So, if you guys like the first part, this is gonna be part 2, and better.
One thing I love doing is hanging out with people who I think are either very conscious beings or developing that consciousness.
Yeah.
And then we take acid together and I show them a piece of media that is actively challenging. For my fiance, she's very conscious and very developed. So she could, handle most anything on psychedelics. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to listen to Hellmouth by Bestia Arcana, which is a beautiful fucking song.
Uh-huh.
It's death. It's not death. It's black metal, and it's very aggressive black metal. Like if you take a shitload of psychedelics and you listen to it in a dark room with your eyes closed, the visual stimulation that comes from it, for me at least, was like I was walking through a fiery hellscape and the sky was millions of saw blades.
Yeah.
But it provided revelation for me, and I thought, okay, you know what, maybe it'll provide revelation for her. Looks like it did.
Uh-huh.
Because now that's one of her favorite fucking songs, and every time she listens to it, there's a new element of revelation that kind of comes from that.
Yeah, I've felt the same way with music specifically and psychedelics, but and I'm like, could I listen to some music that somebody would just be like, it was absolute garbage, and then I hear it on a heroic dose of mushrooms, and I'm just like, oh, it's the sound of the universe or something.
Yeah. No, I have been there. I actually, psychedelics have helped me kind of segue into new things that I wasn't either familiar with or comfortable with before. But there's one film specifically that I love showing people on psychedelics because it's engineered to be watched on acid.
Yeah.
And it's a film called Beyond the Black Rainbow. Yeah, and it's a fucking trip. It's visually, it's a beautiful film. It's a masterpiece in cinematography. As far as the narrative goes, if you watch it sober, it's really hard to follow.
Uh-huh.
It's really hard to follow what's going on because the scenes, so the movie doesn't really rely so much on narrative storytelling as much as it does the emotional impressions you get from each individual scene that develop kind of a contextual understanding of what's happening.
So it's like an anthology? Kind of in the scene, or
no, it's like it is a linear narrative that it kind of follows, but they don't really help you understand what's happening. They just kind of show what's going on, and the more you get into it, and the more times you watch it, the more you kind of understand exactly what's happening. Like the simplest way to describe it is saying there is an organization up in the Pacific Northwest that uses a combination of scientific techniques like psychotherapy, pharmacology, just scientific study.
Yeah.
They combine that with a lot of spiritual practices to try to create the best possible life for a human being.
Okay.
To try to help people get to essentially enlightenment through going through the Arborea Institute.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't work out quite like that.
Yeah.
I think that to a strong degree, the whole concept of that institute in that film is a critique on the institutions that it draws it. Yeah, well, the institutions that it draws from,
the science, the scientific community, or
the scientific community, the entire community of mental health practitioners, the spiritual communities, like the Western gurus, all that type of thing. I think it's a pretty strong critique on them, but there are moments in that film where it just fucking takes off, man.
Yeah.
It blows you out of the water, and it's really hard to describe. It's mainly about a young woman at the Institute who is supposed to be the next evolution in consciousness.
Evolution in consciousness.
And what happens to her?
Yeah.
A lot happens to her. A lot has happened to her that we don't know about.
Yeah.
But basically she's how it kind of initially displays her as being an inmate, where they're just studying her come to find out over the course of the film, like she's very important to them. It's kind of the linchpin of all of their work. But one interesting thing about the film is every character is supposed to be a reflection of the psyche, your psyche, one way or another. Every character is supposed to make you identify with them in one respect or another. Some of them are meant to make you identify with them and then feel bad about that. Like you see yourself through the lens of that character. And like the main villain, if you can call him that, is fucked up and like kind of disgusting in a lot of ways. But at the same time, it makes you feel really sympathetic towards him in a lot of instances. And then moments where you're like, yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from, man. And then moments where you're like, Jesus goddamn Christ, this person's like
demented or whatever it is.
The worst possible human.
Yeah.
It's how it kind of develops is to show him as being the id in a lot of its
like the childlike.
Well, like the id in the Freudian model of the psyche, where the id is the more instinctual drives.
I always thought of it as like being like a child, almost like I want this, I need this. Like, impulsive, I guess.
Yeah, he maintains a lot of control in the beginning of the film, but over the course of the film, it shows him like unraveling. But it also shows why he became the way he did, and then it's like, it's one of those. Yeah, you're like, well, makes sense. Yeah, it's kind of a product of his environment, Yeah. But a media like that, or like, what's his fucking name? Gustave Doré, I think is his name. I'm probably getting that wrong, but he's a French director, and he made a film called Enter the Void, and Enter the Void was actually the first time I ever took acid. My friend Christian sat me down and said, I have a film to show you.
Yeah, that's how he starts off. Well.
Yep. And that was all the context I was provided, and he put on Enter the Void. And have you ever seen it?
No.
So it's a film that is shot entirely in the first-person perspective.
Okay.
About a drug dealer who lives in Tokyo. It opens up with him taking DMT. So you get to see like his DMT experience, which I'll say was very interesting, a very interesting visual depiction of it, but wasn't similar at all to what I had experienced. Yeah. Some people claim like that's very similar to what they experienced, though. But
because there's like what I've heard from people who've either experienced it, they're like, you have to do there's like a ritual, or like you got to do 3 hits or something, and they're like, all right, and then you blast off or whatever, and they're just like,
I mean, I'm a big proponent of the Holofractal Theory, which is a whole fucking thing. It's a group of physicists that kind of are purporting this idea that all of reality is a fractal hologram based off of the core algorithm. What the core algorithm is, they don't know. They're trying to find out. But that all of reality is a fractal off of the thing that started it all.
Yeah.
And a lot of the scientific community kind of berates them, saying like, oh, you're just religious people who are trying to bring your religion into science.
Yeah.
And they maintain, though, like, no, we were like empiricists, we were materialists, and like this is where our research has led us. So I think it's a very interesting theory. Actually, one of the initial working titles for the books that I'm working on, the collection of them, I was going to call the Fractal Scrolls.
Oh, I like that.
But
and the scrolls, I love the scrolls, like Dead Sea Scrolls, or
right. I thought it would be a really interesting title. Yeah. It'd be fun to use that, but I don't know anymore. I don't really know how relevant it is to me anymore, because initially I had a whole section in the book called Fractal Theory.
Yeah.
And then I decided to myself, you know what? I'm just not qualified enough to write that. So I decided to not write it. And I'm focusing on things that I am more
you'd feel
aware of.
Yeah.
Things that I'm not so much like, checking my research after every sentence because I don't remember exactly. I would rather, be able to write a chapter and then review the research instead of forgetting what's going on like every other sentence.
Yeah. So you're like, okay, yeah. I understand that. Although I've always like, what's the harm in like writing a book where you're just like, hey, this is all speculation. I have no idea, but this is how I'm thinking about it in the moment and what we're doing. Because, I think that those are just probably as good, if not better, than a lot of like, You know, I feel like a lot of like nuance in conversation too these days has kind of been like drug out of it, and you're just like, you're not talking the absolute fact check truth. Are you even? What are you saying?
Yep.
Why are you saying it? Like, it's like, I don't know, because it's cool, or I'm got ideas about it. I don't know.
No, I totally get that. You know, I spitballing.
Yeah.
I love spitballing. You know, I want to just have conversations. I want to, like, I have written entire chapters that I've like gone through afterwards and been like, you know what, I don't really agree with that.
You're like, it came out of my brain. I still don't even believe that.
Like, I've probably written like 2 books worth of material that I've scrapped. Not because it wasn't good enough, but because I changed my mind, you know, and I feel like that's a good thing, you know, because it was in the process of externalizing those thoughts where I got to analyze them in a different way. And I got to get a new perspective on things. And then obviously I'm a human being, so I'm learning every day. And I might have an experience that shows me my perspective about a previous experience wasn't exactly what was going on. And I'm like, aha, now I see. So there's this new revelation, which for me isn't like, well, now I have to scrap my whole chapter here. It's like, oh, I get to write a whole new chapter that's actually fucking right.
Yeah, right. See, that's a good way to look at it too, because like I'm in the boat where it's just like, I'm like, everything that I say like this, like, please don't take anything I say as anything as objective truth or nothing, because I'm really out there just to be like, even with the stuff like I talk about paranormal stuff and I don't know anything about half of it. I'm just like, because there's people who've gone out and been able to like make careers, or, you know, like you're a scientist just because of how into that subject you were. And it's like, you didn't get the accreditation, but you're just like, you're, you know, grandfathered in because you just know so much about the subject. And that's kind of how I'm going about it. You know,
and I mean, I didn't go to school for studying the occult.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been interested in it. You know, even things that I don't really associate with anymore, you know, I'm a Reiki master. I don't really do anything with it, but I went through the whole process of the apprenticeship to the journeymanship to the mastership because I wanted to learn it. I wanted to see reality through that perspective.
Yeah, actually, that's something. Well, I always wanted to do that, but yeah, keep going about that.
Yeah. So, and you know, everyone that knows that is like, well, why don't you just get a job as a Reiki master? I'm like, well, shit, dude, I got other things I want to do.
Yeah, right.
You know, I see the value in it a lot. That specific practice, I've gotten in. I don't really get in arguments with people. I have debates, and if I feel like the other person's being a little pedantic in the debate, then I start to just kind of play devil's advocate because I'm an asshole.
Yeah, and you're like, come on, all right, you want something? You want to...
Yeah, as soon as I realize in a conversation I'm not going to get anything interesting out of it, or I'm not going to be able to really convey what I'm saying to the other person, then I just try to piss them off.
I do.
Yep. So I do make the argument, though, that whether or not Reiki has like true metaphysical benefits is irrelevant for me, because I know that every time I had Reiki done on me, I left feeling worlds better.
Yeah.
And my argument for that is, you know, a placebo cure for a psychosomatic event is still a cure.
Yep. No, that's hilarious, because exactly. I've been in that same thing where it says, where I think about the same thing about belief. It's like, if you believe in ghosts and like you think, or, you know, hallucinated or actually experienced like a dead relative, you know, and that made you like feel better on the inside. I'm like, dude, it happened. Don't tell yourself it didn't, you know, like
as far as I'm concerned, everything that you think exists. You know, because what is reality other than all of this sensory input being fed into a computer that your awareness just kind of lives in that computer and it has to just kind of go
decipher it. Like, so, what's that thing too? The guy, there's somebody who's like, I think therefore I am, where it's like
Rene Descartes.
Yes, I was like, Descartes. That's who it is.
See, I used to be a big fan of Descartes, but that specific statement, you know, I don't really agree with necessarily anymore. And that I think that thought itself is not, you know, the identity.
Okay.
I think that awareness is the identity. And I think that thought is a barrier between like the true self and the true self.
So then you've got the thoughts that are always ever flowing, but then the overall like consciousness awareness that's, you know, well, like when
subjected to these thoughts.
Well, when you're sitting there, and you're meditating, and they're like, okay, you know, try and calm your mind, but obviously, like, then they're like, but then there's going to be thoughts, and they're going to come in, and you just have to accept that, and it's like that's being the thought barrier coming in, trying to like, you know, keep that awareness like down, I guess, because that's my problem, I think, is like my mind is never quiet. And trying to find, I've found ways, certain ways to do it, but it's like, to me, they're annoying. I'm like, I have to sit down and I have to try and get in this state of mind, and I have to do this breathing because that's the only way I can get it done. Or, you know.
No, I can totally sympathize with you there. I think that's the curse about thought, is it just never fucking stops. Mm-hmm. But I really like the like Alan Watts's approach towards meditation. Yeah. Where when you begin meditation, you kind of just take your environment for what it is. Yeah. If you're doing a group meditation and someone coughs, then they coughed, whatever's happening, like if the snow is falling, okay, the snow is falling. And you realize, like, okay, me identifying that she coughed, me identifying that the snow is falling, those are me becoming attached. Uh-huh. So just start to detach from the things that are happening around you in your environment.
Interesting. See, that's a good, like...
And then you'll start to move internally, and then the thoughts are happening, and then you just recognize that those thoughts are the same exact thing as everything else happening around you. It's all just phenomena. So you just accept that they're happening and move on. And Ram Dass's thing is, when a thought comes, acknowledge it, move along. Yeah. So instead of so much, being like sitting there meditating and thinking like, man, this chair is getting a little uncomfortable. You sit there and that thought comes and you're like, aha, a thought. Thank you for coming. Yeah. Have a nice day.
That's just like right on out.
And then you'll get into a rhythm eventually where any and every thought that comes, no matter how relentless it is, you just acknowledge it as phenomena. Yeah. And then they all just kind of go by like waves. And then you'll kind of see like, okay, these aren't individual thoughts that are coming. It's an endless stream. And it feels a lot less like something pelting you as much as a constant stream washing over you. Yeah. And then you can just kind of be. Like getting to that point, like you can't get... I mean, I can't say you can't. Yeah. I personally can't get to like a full proper meditation in like 5 minutes, unless I like have one of those acid flashbacks and I just instantly snap into that frame of mind. But when I instantly snap into that frame of mind, it's almost like my body just kind of goes on autopilot. Yeah. Like I'll be mid conversation with someone and the conversation doesn't stop. But my awareness is no longer identifying as the person having the conversation. Yeah. My awareness is just like, aha, here's this person having a conversation with this other person. Yeah. What an interesting thing happening. A lot of people call that dissociation. And I think that like dissociation itself could be a healthy thing or an unhealthy thing, just depending on how you look at it and depending on what's going on. Like if you're driving your car and you're like very mentally unwell and you just dissociate and then wreck into a barrier, like obviously that's unhealthy. Mm-hmm. But if you're driving your car and you snap into just a pure awareness frame of mind, then you're not going to wreck your car because the identity of you that is driving that car is going to continue driving that car as you would no matter what. Yeah. But your awareness just isn't identifying as being that at that point in time. Yeah. You're just watching the self just do. Mm-hmm. So it's not like the self is going to stop doing whatever it's doing because you dissociated. Yeah. The self is going to continue going on about its business because when you're very mentally unwell and you dissociate, that is the self dissociating. That is the thinking mind latching onto a thought which derails it. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden the mind loses control of the body. When you snap into this state of pure awareness, the mind and the body are just doing what they did before. Yeah. There's no difference in what's happening there. It's just your awareness has taken a step back. Now, that step back that your awareness takes in that is what a lot of people call enlightenment, is what a lot of people aspire to. Like Neem Karoli Baba, who was Ram Dass's guru, the general consensus is that he lived in that state of mind all the time. Not state of mind, he lived in that all the time, which was outside of any state of mind. Mm-hmm. His body and his mind were just vibing, just doing their thing. And his awareness was just, like, look at all this. Just existing. Uh-huh. And I mean, that is what for a lot of people is enlightenment. There are some people who argue that there are stages beyond that. And I mean, whether there's truth to that or not, that's going to be for everyone to decide for themselves. I was going to
say, do you think that's on, like, is that possible on, like, planet Earth with, like, our human minds.
You know, I think if that's possible, it's possible anywhere.
Okay.
I have a friend of mine who is kind of the pioneer of a philosophy called Vedantic nihilism.
Vedantic?
Vedantic.
Okay, not pedantic. Sorry.
Yeah, not pedantic.
Yeah.
Vedantic. It's a nihilism inspired by the Vedas.
Okay.
So the Vedas are really old Hindu texts.
Yeah.
And the philosophy that they kind of established really developed what Hinduism became. So when something is kind of tied into that philosophy, no matter what religion it is, you can just call it Vedantic.
Yeah.
And when he says nihilism, it's a lot less of, oh, nothing matters.
Yeah.
And a lot more of, nothing, the beautiful, perfect nothingness. That's what matters.
Yeah.
I don't really solidly identify as any one thing, which is I'm probably like over the course of this podcast, I've said like, oh, when someone asks me, I tell them I'm this, I tell them I'm that. I love telling people different things because it all kind of depends on my mood and my frame of mind.
Yeah, your flow. You're never in that stasis, because that's one of those problems where I'm like, somebody could tell me something and then I'd be like, I totally believe that. That makes total sense. And then I hear the opposite end of it. And then, none of the counter arguments. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I believe that side. And then like, so to me, to stand on any one firm ground and to say anything has always seemed like, like I'm literally like shooting myself in the head or in the foot, because it's like, what am I, I'm standing for something. And now like I have now boxed myself in. I can't maneuver.
I think the only thing that really matters to me is that development towards trying to get enlightened in this lifetime, if we want to use that nomenclature.
Yeah.
But really is just development in general, evolution, progress. And I feel like if I tie myself to any one belief structure forever and say, this is who I am,
well, then,
I'm just creating another obstacle. It's like the golden chain of righteousness. Someone can get right to the brink of being that enlightened entity.
Yeah.
And then they just can't let go of how righteous they are, because now they are a really good yogi, but they're not a bodhisattva because they can't break that last chain. They're very comfortable in how good they are at being a spiritual person.
And then the pride, like, what do you even call that? Is pride the right thing that would be, I guess, keeping them back?
It could certainly be pride. It could be someone's like I do all of the mantras exactly how they're supposed to be done. I have dedicated my entire life to this. I do it perfectly. I won't change that. And that could be pride leading to that. Or it could be someone's like very into the routine. So they're very, very zen and spiritual. And then, a cat jumps out of a tree and lands on their head and knocks them over mid-meditation.
Throws the whole,
Yep. And then all of a sudden, they're not so zen anymore.
Yeah.
They're very grounded in reality. People who get really into techniques. Someone who's like, oh, no, the only way to reach enlightenment is Mahayana Buddhism done in this specific fashion.
Yeah.
That person's not going to fucking get enlightened because they are so rooted and attached to that structure. They're so attached to that structure that's trying to tell them to not be attached to structure.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of, it's like if, for jiu-jitsu, there's people who they drill, and they will drill, and they will drill, and then there's people who only like to roll, which is basically just spar, And so that whole thing is like there's a creativity to the rolling that you don't get with just drilling something over and over, but you also don't get that snap technique and the correct positioning all the time if you don't just drill it over and over. So it's a weird
be fluid, be dynamic, move between things. Don't be this or that. Don't exist on a binary, just be. I'm a big advocate for learning and actively challenging belief. I was really influenced by chaos magic, specifically Liber Null and Psychonaut by Peter Carroll, because he one of his core tenets for what his disciples or whatever should do is oh, you believe this thing? Believe the opposite for a while. Believe the opposite until you really believe the opposite.
Yeah.
And then once you really believe the opposite, stop believing that. Believe something else. Just constantly actively challenging beliefs. And it's not just so much I believe that there is a gateway towards enlightenment and I shall reach it. Yeah. It could be something as mundane as, I believe that Sumatran coffee tastes better than Ethiopian coffee. Yeah. And just decide for a while, no, Ethiopian coffee does taste better than Sumatran coffee. And then decide, no, Colombian coffee is the best.
I've been wrong this whole time.
I think actually probably one of the more challenging ones for me was with sexuality.
Yeah.
Was being like, no, I'm not straight. Mm-hmm. I'm gay for a while.
Yeah. And then just being like, okay, now I'm 180 degrees now.
Exactly. And so, I mean, this culture, this day and age is so attached to identity. Mm-hmm. So people want to know, like, well, are you straight? Are you queer? Yeah. Like, what are you?
It has to be like like there's some kind of like label, and even like non-binary has become coming kind of like its own label. Yeah.
NB, like the NB culture. It's like, oh, I'm non-binary. That is its own identification.
Yeah, I didn't know it had a name to it now. NB.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. It's like ENBY, but it's, NB.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, non-binary. So, I mean, that whole culture is like defined its own identity now. Which, whatever. That's fun. Great for them. But when someone asks me like, well, like, are you queer? I'm like, I sexually identify as an American because I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want to do.
Yeah, it's like, you got nothing bad in it. Yeah.
I love... I love bringing my nationality into things that have nothing to do with it.
You're just like, I'll respect the goddamn flag. And like, what is that? What?
Yep, I sexually identify as God's gun and government. Yep. No, I get why people love identity so much because it provides them this like sense of belonging.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like my tribe should be defined by the people who are exactly the same as me.
Yeah.
I would say like my core tribe, like I'm getting married later this year and my groomsmen are this fucking motley crew of people. I love them all to death. That's why they're all my groomsmen. Like my best man, a fella who is, a fellow black metal musician, and we play in a couple projects together, but he is very much tied into the neo-pagan animism.
Yeah.
Very much, rooted in like his culture, but in politically, he's very egalitarian. Kind of the liberal side of things, but almost a little socialist in some respects.
Yeah.
But not so much where he's waving the fucking sickle and hammer around.
Yeah, you're not going to them rallies.
Yeah. And then another one of them is a very good buddy of mine who's a chemist.
Yeah.
And he's a professional chemist now, works for a company that processes cannabis flower into concentrates.
Lovely. That's my buddies too.
Yeah. He is a very, very much kind of a materialist.
Yeah.
But he's not like an aggressive materialist where he's like, there is no God and you're an idiot if you believe otherwise.
Yeah. And you're just like, here's my Rolls Royce. Check it.
And politically, he's very much libertarian in that he's just like, don't fucking touch me. Don't look at me. Don't talk to me. Like, let me do my thing, government.
Yeah.
And then another one of them is a fucking mess of a human being. He is one of my favorite people. But he, as far as his religious identification goes, it's really hard to kind of pin him down. I would say definitely kind of leans into that whole pagan vibe, but with a lot of satanic influence there. I think he's just fluid, doesn't really attach himself to one specific thing.
Yeah.
Politically, also kind of hard to define, but extremist in one way or another, or both at the same time.
Yeah. So just like, it's like if one person's pushing one way, it's just like right on the other side of the spectrum, or
he does have convictions. Like he does have specific things that he believes.
Yeah, where it's like this is line.
Like he's as much a communist as he is a Nazi as he is an anarchist. It's
that's all confusing right there.
It's so confusing. But talking to him is great and it's a lot of fun. And then the last guy is like culturally he's Jewish, religiously he is very atheistic. Very atheistic.
Is it because of his upbringing in that religion?
Well, actually, so his father's Jewish, his mother's Catholic.
Okay.
Yep. And so culturally he is Jewish, but he was raised like he went to a Catholic school.
Oh, yeah.
So I think there might be a little bit of like religious dysphoria there because But his dad's also like pretty grounded in like deterministic materialism. Very much just kind of an atheist. But he's fucking great guy. Politically, he's kind of a statist.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, you know, I think that the government is very important to have, but he's also very libertarian in that he thinks that government intervention is not a good thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've got everything from like socialists to Nazis to libertarians to statists, all kind of in my little tribe, and these are like my best friends. Whereas me personally, like I love telling people, probably the most honest thing that I could as far as my politics go is, if you give me complete power, I am authoritarian in a way that the world has never seen. I am as much of a tyrant as could possibly be, and I believe that's the right kind of government. But if you don't give me complete control, I am an anarchist. No one can tell me what to do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's exactly how I feel, because like sometimes you'll be like, not like you're above the law, but sometimes you're just like, I feel that way. I
am above the law.
Yeah,
fuck the law.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, and I will now make the law, and you must follow my law.
Exactly. I think it's probably a very egotistical thing to think that, oh, I know best. Mm-hmm. But it's not so much that I think I know best as much as I don't think anyone else knows any better than I do necessarily.
Yeah.
I think that qualified professionals are qualified professionals, and if they make a recommendation, then it's probably a recommendation I'm going to go with. But if you have a fucking reality TV star moralizing to me about all kinds of fucking nationalist bullshit, then I'm not going to deal with it. Or you've got our current president who... Mm-hmm. It's like a demented old man.
Yeah.
I don't feel like he's qualified to tell me what to do either. And actually, there was a pretty funny line in Rick and Morty where the president assaults FDR and says, "You try having a historic administration after Facebook."
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fair. You know,
yeah.
I don't think anyone could ever come into power at this point in time and not be ruthlessly criticized, because you know, everyone can talk about anything all of the time.
Yeah.
And everyone does talk about everything all of the time. So I think that as far as a unified front goes, we'll never see that again. You know, I think that the only time that might happen is during like a major conflict.
Yeah.
But even then, the unified front is only going to be like maybe 60 to 70% of the people. And the other 30 to 40% are still going to be like, well, fuck this. This doesn't matter. Why are we doing this?
Yeah, because then you're just like, what are we trying to like, repair something? Or, you know, because that's really what it is. It's just like people want to go back. Like, we need to go back to the you know, where the veil was there and we just believed in the system. And now it's like, we're to the point where it's shaken up. And I do wonder, though, like now with all this, you know, especially technology, Facebook, all that, like knowing all of that and seeing all that, do you actually think that there's going to be like people can, sorry, I just had one of those moments where I'm like, what was I talking about?
No, I get that. Yeah, I do think I could kind of follow that train of thought, though. Yeah. I saw a quote the other day that was pretty interesting for me. It was pretty relevant to that, where they were saying that, you know, a study was conducted.
Yeah.
Where they would tell people like blatant lies in a convincing fashion, and the people would just believe them.
Yeah.
And then very shortly after, like the next day, tell them like, oh, that wasn't true.
Yeah.
That wasn't a lie. And instead of them being outraged, they were like, I knew it wasn't a lie. Or like they're like, I knew it was a lie. Like I knew it was bullshit.
Yeah.
Because we kind of exist in this state as society right now where everything is possible and nothing is true.
I think that, that's exactly what it's on.
So we just take everything at face value, be like, yeah, okay, sure. And then the second we find out it's not true, we're like, okay, big surprise.
Yeah.
So instead of people experiencing outrage at their leaders lying to them anymore, we just assume that they're always lying so that we can feel right when it comes out.
Exactly. And then there's like that, what my whole thing was too, is that to the transparency is like, okay, so now that you have Facebook and everything, it's like, even if they're doing that, like you can still, you're looking at that and you're like, I don't believe any of like what any of these headlines say. The only time that I start to believe the headlines is like weeks after, because of our like 24-hour news cycle. You're like, oh, they're still talking about it. I guess there must be like a lot of fire for no smoke kind of thing.
In general, I don't like to believe any news from any entity that I can't reach out and speak to the person who told me that. I love following a lot of these like underground, like independent journalists.
Yeah.
Like Atlas News, Rose Warfare, Popular Front. I love following them because they have
Popular Front. I've heard of it. Is that YouTube?
It's Jake Hanrahan.
Okay.
He is primarily a conflict reporter.
Uh-huh.
Like he has he's on YouTube. He's put out a couple like short documentaries. He mainly does his podcast though.
Okay.
It's excellent. He also does like just kind of general blurb reporting on social media. It's funny. I get most of my news these days from Instagram.
Which is, that's kind of the funny shift of things now. Instead of going from like, the natural or the, what'd you call them, the mainstream tabloids or anything like that. Or even like, I remember going to like, you'd look on AOL or Yahoo or something, they have all those little like blurbs and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I'll believe, I just started taking them, face value. And now I'm just like, skip, done.
Yep.
Like,
no, I'm totally with you. The reason I love these news organizations is they do report on things that are happening, but the person who, the entity that owns these companies are the journalists who are writing these things and publishing them because they're all independent. Mm-hmm. So if I have a question or I want to actively challenge what they're saying, I just fucking DM them on Instagram, be like, are you sure about that?
Well, like my buddy and I, we used to do, we were film guys, and they were like, we wanted to pitch shows, and so they're like, well, you have to know a producer, you have to send it to producers, so we're just sending it out to all sorts of, like NBC or whatever, and they were just like, you get one of those like, automated letters like, we don't even know what you sent us, but we don't want it. Like,
yep. You gotta love that, right?
Yeah.
The automation of communication that is taking place is frankly abhorrent
and infuriating. I could not get a hold to get my internet fixed for the longest time, and I'm like, you want me to do this through online? And then they wanted me to type text to a robot about my problems, and I'm like, this is killing me.
Yeah, someone that I know that I am close with works for a very major company where most of everything that they have is automated. NDA, so no names, but works for a very major company where almost everything is automated, and they put in, they got exposed to COVID and then got sick. So they were thinking, shit, okay, I need to go get tested. So they were, put it in like, okay, I need to go get tested, so I won't be able to come in until like this Friday when I can get tested. And then it'll probably be a couple days until I get the results. So they're like, okay, we'll just put like a 2-week block on there. If you get your if you get your negative test back before then, we'll just end it and come back to work. So the fucking computer system puts that in twice. Yeah. So there's like a 2-month block out. They put in their negative test, are like, okay, can I come back to work? Nothing, because it's all automated. Yeah. And so they call in, and it was a 7-hour process of just navigating the phone tree, having it tell you at 3:30 in the afternoon, please call between our business hours, which are 8 in the morning to 5 in the evening. Like, are you fucking serious? It's 3 in the afternoon. You guys are open. And like, to be honest, it was probably just they couldn't handle the call volume, so they just kept putting it off. Mm-hmm. But it ended up being like a 7-hour process to get a hold of somebody to put in the report. Yeah. Not to get it resolved.
Oh, so they just like, all right, well, we'll see you in 10 business days and you got to call back.
It ended up being resolved not the next day, but the day after. Yeah. So they got to go back to work pretty quickly. But just that level of automation is sapping the humanity, man. Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of the very technological society that we live in now. I do feel like there are a lot of things that could be better if things were a little more strictly controlled. I don't want to get too political on a paranormal podcast. Yeah. But yeah, I mean that whole fucking shtick is just, it's too much for me, man. Like I mean, because that's kind of how I feel about ideology, is that ideology is the enemy. And all of these structures are built off of a very corporate ideology. Yeah. And that very corporate ideology is, remove the human equation as much as possible, automate as much as possible, so that we can have the most streamlined and efficient structure, which sure makes sense on the surface, but that's the problem with ideology, is ideology always makes sense on the surface. There's always this toxic mess that lies underneath it, which is, and I do see like these ideologies as being extant things. Yeah. Not necessarily like, there's a man sitting in a room somewhere with the word who is named communism.
Yeah.
I don't see that, but I do see these ideas as having a kind of a life of their own.
Yeah. Or it's
and their own will, because they have an expressed purpose, and they have an expressed goal, and they have an expressed method on how to get there. So they have all of these things that are kind of precursors for, being extant in one form or another.
Yeah.
I've had conversations with people, especially like my atheist friends, the deterministic materialist friends of mine, where I'll say something like, well, thought doesn't matter. And they're like, well, thoughts do matter because, thoughts started things that started other things that started terrible things.
Thought crimes,
or like, anti-Semitism balling up into Nazism resulting in the Holocaust, And that was actually a specific argument that was made to me. I'm like, dude, I'm not saying that thoughts don't have any impact. I'm saying that these thought forms that everyone's so attached to don't have inherent worth.
Yeah.
I'm saying that these things are the things that are preventing us from evolution. These are the things that, like, this attachment to ideology, this attachment to thought form construct, that is the enemy. These thoughts don't matter because these thoughts are the enemy. I am agreeing with you in you saying these terrible things are happening because of thought. But the problem is that you're defending thought when I am telling you these thoughts are the enemy. And it makes sense why someone would misinterpret the statement of, thought doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because that could easily be interpreted as saying, well, thoughts don't actually play any role.
In anything. It's just... It's how you act on those thoughts. Yeah.
The problem is that the thoughts play the biggest role in everything. These thoughts guide the decisions almost everyone makes.
Well, it's the seed. It's just not the actual physical thing.
Because these ideologies, these thought form constructs, I can kind of relate to goetic demons, which is where
goetic,
like the Goetia.
No. What is that?
So the Lesser Key of Solomon and the Greater Key of Solomon, written by John Dee, are really old treatises on how to summon demons and control them.
Okay.
But in that whole mythology,
like a step-by-step ritualistic.
Yes.
Okay.
Like a cookbook on how to summon demons.
Well, that was mostly where I'm like, where do you guys you guys are just you just start reading stuff and they're like, well, here's some vague steps on how it happens.
Most modern occult stuff is pretty vague. Yeah. They don't really go into deep detail on things, and a lot of it, in my opinion, a lot of it is they just can't really flesh out all the details. So they say, the rest you will learn through your own practice. It is hidden knowledge that you must unlock yourself.
There is some times I hear about people who are like, I didn't really know what we were doing, but then we had a little pentagram made out of salt and we got a bunch of candles and then we said stuff in the mirror and then next thing we know, things are falling off the counters or whatever. And you're like, the intent is there. Do you really need, obviously because ritual is supposed to be it's the representation of the things, right? I learned somewhere where it's you're doing this as
it's a practice to try to manifest that intent into reality.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that ritual plays a very important part in actualizing that kind of practice or that kind of behavior, but I don't think the particulars of ritual are as important as a lot of people assign them to.
Yeah, because that was one of those things, say that you want to summon something, and, you go through most of the steps, and you're doing, the intent is still there, but, I forgot to, I used red candles instead of black or something, and you're like, well, then...
oh man, I would love to do that ritual, but I know it's not going to work because I don't have Blackthorn that's been buried in a grave for 70 days.
Yeah. I'm like, well,
the act of harvesting Blackthorn is one thing. You do that ceremonially, and that creates a certain importance for that thing.
Yeah.
Then you bury it in a grave for 70 days.
Yeah.
And then that adds a whole other level of importance because there's all this time in between when you harvest it and when you can use it.
Is there there's numeric thing to it as well?
I'm sure there is. This is just a random example.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Just off the top of my head. So there's all this additional importance that is created in this process. And through that, the intent gets so much stronger. But I feel like the whole reason that exists, that type of practice, that type of requirement for the ritual exists, is specifically to foster the intent and make it stronger. So if the intent is strong enough, you don't need it.
Yeah.
seriously though, if the intent is strong enough, if the will is strong enough, you don't need anything. You can sit you can just plop down on the ground and then do the whole thing in your head, manifest it in reality like that. But most people can't do that. Most people don't have that level of focus, that level of will. I certainly don't. Yeah. You know, I use ceremony, I use ritual as a technique to help me focus, to help me level out, and then channel that energy into a specific direction.
Okay. Now, I just do have a question too, like with that ritual, performing ritual, what is like a common ritual that you would use just to do, you know, like what's the purpose of most of them? I mean, people in the mainstream are like, okay, so you're going to try and get a demon out, or you're going to try and summon some sort of entity that can do things.
So where I actually have a lot of difference between me and a lot of other occultists is a lot of occultists will set up rituals and do rituals to try to affect the material world, right? Which, I mean, sure, makes sense. You know, like you do a wealth ritual because you're broke and you need some money and you need a resolution to happen. I don't really care. Like, if I need money, I'm going to go fucking work. Yeah. You know, if I want to make something material happen, I will just make it happen myself. Yeah. I do ritual, I do ceremony primarily for hierophany. Like, more than anything in this whole realm, I do consider myself a hierophant over everything else, because I don't really try to affect the material world through spirituality, because if I'm going to interact with the material world, I'm going to interact with it by its own rules, you know, because I'm here in school, I'm going to take the curriculum, you know, I'm going to try to figure out how to make material things work materially. Mm-hmm. I'm going to try to figure out how to make spiritual things work spiritually. Yeah. So hierophany, are you familiar with that at all? Yeah. Hierophany is communication with the divine. Okay. It's just for me,
so like prayer or ritual or...
Kind of. Like prayer is you talking to God, right? Yeah. Hierophany is you and God having a conversation. It's trying to send information and get information back consistently.
Yeah, so what some people would say is like, you know, when they're like, I'm downloading things from the divine or the...
That's hierophany, you know?
Okay, all right.
Hierophany is just the fucking bullshit academic term that people use for it.
Hey, man, I needed that definition. Otherwise, I would have been like, yeah, exactly.
Yes,
Hierophonetic.
That thing.
Yes, I love that thing.
But yeah, and it's like when people talk about revelations that they have, like during psychedelic experiences or during ritual, like that's hierophany, is information flowing in. Information flowing in and information flowing out, like that stream is what I'm trying to achieve. Yeah. Because like for me, like a prayer is like, God, please send me something that can show me how to be enlightened. Yeah. And hierophany is, God, I have a question. Yeah. In the process of becoming enlightened, is this technique going to help me out more, or is that one? And then I get whatever impression I get back. And then I'm like, okay, I understand that, but and it's a back and forth, you know. And it's not so mundane as that, you know, just like a texting God or something. Yeah. But that's the easiest analogy for it, in that every time I get that downloading the information from a source beyond this one, it's never through symbols. Like, it's never through words, it's never through images. It's just concept. It's just like I get a raw impression of something that I have to try to interpret. Like when I took DMT, I took like 2.5 grams.
Okay. What is it? And because I want to, but I've never actually done DMT.
A quarter
gram. I don't know
what's
like, that's like a bowl worth. Or...
Like a quarter gram is like a single dose. Okay. I had a buddy who was on tour.
So that's 8 whole doses.
Yeah, more or less. Okay. You know, and like I had a buddy who was on tour, and he was playing here in town, and I hooked him up with the show, and then his whole band crashed at my place, and instead of bringing a bunch of money to like barter with people, he brought a bunch of DMT to barter with people. And it was the last stop of the tour, and he had a shitload left over, and he was like, I love you, man. Here, just take all of this. Yeah. And so I took it and I gave some to my friends. And like they all came for the like show's after party at my place, and we all fucking blasted off. But I took an asinine amount of DMT, but I took an asinine amount of DMT because I didn't have a proper way to take it. You're supposed to sublimate DMT, vaporize it kind of. I didn't have a way to do that, so I had to smoke it. So a lot of it got wasted in the process. So instead of, taking a regular dose and then, wasting like 2/3 of it and then only getting like 1/3 of a dose, I decided to just really crank the amount I'm taking so that I'm still getting that blast off effect, because I don't have a way to take it other than wasting it. Because I wasn't going to fucking... I wasn't sober, so I wasn't going to go drive to a smoke shop, buy a crack pipe, and come home.
Yeah, just so you can actually get it out,
So I took that amount because I wanted to still achieve that effect. But when I did, it was like someone plucked my consciousness out of my body and then flung it through the cosmos. There's really no way to describe it in any way that can actually convey what the sensation was like. But I'm hurling through the cosmos, and all this different stuff's happening on the way. But I basically land at the feet of God, the feet of the divine, and it communicates with me. And it communicated more information to me in that point in time than I had ever received through anything else I had ever done.
Yeah.
And it took me like a solid year to try to put all of that information into a form that I could give to other people to understand.
Yeah.
And I finally managed to do that to a point where it's like, this is what I was told in my own words, because if you're trying to communicate anything, you can't communicate intention. You can only communicate through symbols, and whether those symbols are images or are words, are sounds, it's all a symbol that blocks the recipient from the core intention. So I had to try to find the best way to arrange symbols in a pattern that got the message across as true as I possibly could.
Yeah, when you're communicating out words. Okay.
Like when I try to share it with other people, if I want to try to share what revelations I got from the divine with other people, then I'm going to have to find a way to translate it, because I can't just beam that knowledge into someone's head.
That experience, like that, and that's something that I've always wished, just in general, where I could touch them. It's just where they're telepathy, and you're got it.
Yep. I really wish I could do that. I know some people who claim that is something that is within their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Whether that's true or not.
Yeah.
It's true, sure.
Yeah, you believe it's true, so it is to you.
A lot of claims that people make, though, I feel are spiritual badges.
Yeah.
Where they're I can do this. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, that's excellent. I'm happy for you. Yeah. And whether they even believe that they can do it or not, is questionable for sure. A lot of, especially in the psychics that I've met in my life, a lot of them really want you to think they're a psychic. Whether they actually believe that they're psychic or not is debatable.
Yeah.
I've definitely met some people in my life who I do think were you've got something going on for sure.
An adeptness.
But those are never the people who advertise on billboards that I am a psychic and I will let you know what your future holds.
Yeah.
Sure you will.
But so you said that you had experience with people who changed that a little bit, or you kind of well...
No, that belief or that perspective of mine has never really changed.
Okay.
In that I do think that most of the people that I've met who advertise themselves as being psychics are generally charlatans. In the same way that I think the horoscope is bullshit. Mm-hmm. Because if you say a really vague thing to a really big audience, you're going to get some people in there who really identify with that vague thing, and they think that you're fucking holy. So the psychics that I've met, in my experiences with psychics, trying to have conversations with them and get their psychic wisdom from have them impart it to me. A lot of the times they will just say really vague shit, and they're just fishing for details. Yeah. And they're just fishing for details to try to build off of so that they can sell you on their abilities and have you come back and spend money with them again. That has been my core experience with psychics. I have met people though who don't advertise themselves as being psychics, but will just say something to me, and I'm how the fuck would you know that? You've got no business knowing that about me, and they'll just be oh yeah, no, it's just evident, you know, that when I look at you, I see your physical features, and when they look at you, they see your physical features and whatever's happening right behind it.
Yeah, like that aura or whatever. Because I met a girl who was telling me about auras, and it was interesting because, she knew me prior to telling me she had done the auras or like saw them for the longest time. But when she told me, she was like, you have like, I see like flecks of yellow and green, and then like you're really grounded down here. And like it was one of those things where like, she's like, I see like this brown and surrounding like the bottom of you. And I'm like, because that means grounded or something. And I was like, that's interesting because I do feel relatively grounded, but I don't know if it's just like, she's like, I'll just kind of pull from his, my own kind of like, I am kind of grounded. I am very charismatic when I'm into stuff or
if I really get in the rhythm and if I really get into that specific form of consciousness, like when I look at someone, like I can see shit happening around them for sure. Like easiest way to communicate that to other people is like, I can see their aura.
Yeah.
A lot of the terms like that are really kind of attached to a lot of hokey new age bullshit.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed that's where it kind of, not that it maybe stems from, but that's where like
it lives.
Becomes yes, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and a lot of the hokey new age bullshit, I think is a big red flag. Like when someone tells me that they want to, that they see my aura, so they want to provide me a crystal that they think can alter my vibration in a positive fashion. And I'm like, okay, well, how much does it cost? And they're like, $17.95.
Yeah, and you're like, wow, that's an expensive life changer.
Yeah, I'm like, fucking, a lot of it is just big red flags for me, so I try to avoid that kind of terminology. Yeah. So like when I'm in that specific state of consciousness, like I can definitely see the things happening around someone, but am I going to be like, all up in their business? Like I have seen your aura and I can tell by the purple crown that you are quite a divine and enlightened being. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to take the information that I'm given and then operate with that myself in a fashion that is going to be beneficial for my work. Because I'm not here to help anyone else get enlightened. I'm here to be enlightened. Because, I mean, depending on one's perspective, like once I achieve enlightenment, everyone will be enlightened.
Yep, and then I'm good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I don't really see a whole lot of the point in trying to convince anyone else of anything.
Yeah.
I'm going to do the work. And when the work is done, I'll be done with the work. Until then, all that's left is the work. You know? Like I'm not trying to set anyone up with their own spiritual path. Like I'm writing the stuff that I'm writing for two reasons. One, because I'm trying to externalize it in a fashion that allows me to develop it further and make it better for myself. And the other is to provide people a path to start on. Like if someone doesn't really know where to begin, doesn't know really what to do, I want to give them that first step along the journey. And then as soon as they're done with whatever I have set up, they can discard it and move on to the next thing that is going to help them continue doing the work. And the organization that kind of surrounds this work is more just a structure for myself and the people that are kind of in my tribe to help each other do the work. If someone comes along and they want to join, sure, I'll consider it if I think that they're really genuinely trying to do the work, and I think that the work that they're trying to do is going to help us try to do our own work.
Yeah.
I love telling people I'm starting a cult because it is. It's an organization founded on religious principles.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm really not trying to recruit people for it yet. No.
Yeah, you're like, well.
Really not trying to, because I don't feel like my energy is very well spent in trying to convince other people of anything. I feel like my energy is best spent working on myself and helping the people around me work on themselves. Providing an environment in which that kind of support is readily available. Because if you have these feelings, if you have this impulse to do the work, and you're surrounded by a bunch of fundamentalist Christians or a bunch of deterministic materialists that will all tell you that either you're sinning or you're crazy, you're not going to get the work done. You need a support structure, and you need to have someone you can bounce ideas off of. And I mean, ultimately that's what we seek to provide for each other. And then as people kind of come along and join, you basically have to join the tribe before you can join the cult, I have to like implicitly trust someone, be very close with them, and so does everyone else.
Yeah.
Before I'm willing to kind of open that door to someone.
Well, yeah, you don't want anybody just coming into your cult, but it also seems like if you cultivate that type of environment and that kind of structure, you're going to, the people who you want, you can kind of cultivate without even really needing to go out and like, you know,
exactly
actually procure them. And
if we're creating an environment that is truly conducive to the work getting done and getting done right,
yeah,
then the people who are trying to do the work and do it right are just going to show up.
Yeah. Which is one of those weird, like, divine synchronicities that I've always kind of found. Because I'm like, yeah, it's like, you know, that build it, they will come. Or like, you know, one of my things was like, I've always been trying to get into the film industry. And it's just like, you know, there's like this term where it's like, you know, if you want to do something, you'll find any feasible way to do it.
Yeah.
You know, sacrificing things so that you can get what you really want. Or there's like, or if you don't really want it, you'll find every excuse not to. So, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, like I liken it to we're digging a well because there's water, and as soon as we reach a point in which the organization it truly is beneficial and functioning for everyone involved, then the water is just going to start coming up. You know, I have no qualms about that. But the other thing is, I'm not trying to start a new religion. You know. Mm-hmm. I'm not, well, I mean, that's debatable, but I'm not trying to start Catholicism too.
Yeah, you're not trying to, it's not a movement.
Because I'm not trying to convince people. I'm trying to create the right environment.
Yeah.
And once the right environment is created and set up, the people who really are conducive to the work are going to show up and do the work. The people who aren't conducive to the work aren't going to show up. Or if they do show up, they're going to look around and be like, okay, well, this isn't right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of course, there's always opportunists, and opportunists will always look for, you know, any possibility to try to get into something and take control. But like, again, if we set this up right, that's just not going to be possible. You know, people will, you know, show up, try their best to be manipulative jackasses, realize it's just not working out, and they're going to fuck off themselves, or we'll make them fuck off. You know, we refuse to abide anything that isn't conducive to the work, because the work is really all there is. I've got no time left for anything else. You know, like I'm sure I'm a young man, but I'm not going to live forever. I don't have 1,000 years to get this work done.
And that's interesting that you keep you're like, it's work. When you say work, you're talking about like the path to enlightenment, or the work necessary to get.
So I see when I talk about the work, like capital W work, the work is everything on the path. Anything that you do that moves you closer towards that.
All right. Yeah.
Even if it's making a big mistake, you know, that big mistake is still the work, because it provides you a new revelations. Mm-hmm. So for me, the work is like, sure, it's the ritual stuff, it's the ceremonial stuff, but it's also the organizational stuff, it's the writing. The work is also my music, very much so, my music, but the work is also my job.
Yeah.
You know, the work is also the relationships that I have with everybody else. You know, the work is everything in this incarnation that I am going through, that I am going through consciously, and that I am aware of the goal while I'm engaging with it. All the stuff that I do that isn't the work is the shit that happens when I try to forget what the goal is.
Yeah.
When I try to distract myself and be like, oh, it doesn't really matter right now because I'm just having fun, you know?
Yeah.
Or like, I'm sad, so I'm just going to, you know, mope, you know? Like that, to me, that isn't the work because I'm not doing it consciously.
Yeah.
Or even if I'm doing a ceremony and I'm not doing it consciously, that's not the work because it doesn't help anyone do anything. So when I say create an environment that is conducive to the work getting done, it's creating an environment in which people are allowed to live their lives in a fashion that is truly conscious, where they're identifying with their awareness as they move through reality instead of identifying with their ego. Mm-hmm. But if someone, if an opportunist were to try to join this organization to try to manifest some element of control, I mean, really, how much control are you going to have over a bunch of people that are constantly trying to live in their awareness?
Yeah.
It's going to be a fucking pain in the ass, and you're not going to really get anything done.
I mean, yeah, exactly. But it does also, doesn't it kind of all hinge off of like what everybody believes that is,
Yep.
kind of, because I mean, once somebody else has this, like, I like Chris's idea, but
Yep.
let's tweak it a little bit, take it to my realm, and then all of a sudden you've got
a schism.
Yeah, like a offshoot. Yeah.
The thing though is just like Discordianism, I encourage schisms.
Yeah.
Because a schism is a development from their interpretation of my thought. Uh-huh. If I can present my thought in a fashion that they can understand and they can work with, that's great.
Yeah.
But if they can develop their own systems from that work better for them, then that's a good thing. And then if other people see their system and think, well, maybe that'll work better for me, that's a good thing, because that's the work getting done.
Yeah.
Like an opportunist would be someone who comes in, sees the organization as a way to make money.
Yeah.
Or as a way to get gratification in other ways. Mm-hmm. Those type of people would come in and they would say something to the effect of like, well, yeah, this is great and all, but I really think that if you all start making T-shirts for me and I'm selling them, then we can really, take this up a whole other level. We can move up to the next level and start recruitment. And I'm like, buddy.
Yeah.
Like recruitment will become important when recruitment becomes important.
Yeah.
We're trying to create a system that helps us engage in the work and is apt to evolution as we go along.
So like it kind of sounds like L. Ron Hubbard kind of being like an opportunist in that fashion, coming into, what was that guy, Jack Parsons? Yeah, like coming in and like, here's this foundational idea that this guy's kind of coming with, and then you've got Hubbard coming in with his own little, I want to make it a religion and I want to
organize it.
Yeah.
And organization's fine and all, as long as it doesn't become an abusive, manipulative organization like the Church of Scientology has definitely become. Interestingly enough, those types of organizations, though, can birth really positive things.
Yeah.
So specifically with Scientology, there was an organization that emerged from them called the Process Church of the Final Judgment.
Okay.
The Process Church started because they liked a lot of the techniques that were being used in Scientology, but the organization itself and a lot of their core beliefs, they took some serious issues with. So the Process Church of the Final Judgment ended up taking some of the structures and techniques that they were using and developed them in a different way. Actually moved more towards a Judeo-Christian interpretation, but they worship is a strange word when talking about the Process Church, because there is some division as to whether or not they believe the entities exist, or to whether they believe that they're reflections of consciousness, or to whether they believe they're just metaphors. Yeah. So I lean more towards the Process Church, thinking that they're more aspects of consciousness, because I think that's the diplomatic route to take, because it's not discounting the truly metaphysical power behind these things. But it's not saying that there's a dude named God sitting on a cloud telling us what to do. They have what they call the quaternary instead of the Trinity, which is viewed as like a triangle with a triangle in the middle, right?
Oh, so like okay, not a Jewish star.
No,
not
so like just like a triangle, but with the same triangle just smaller inside the middle, breaking it up into 4 even segments.
Oh, like the Triforce.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just like, I have to take it back to Zelda.
Oh, nerds.
Yeah. It's like, these fucks again.
But they have the 3 on the outside are the 3 more disparate forms of the 3 more disparate things, right? One of them is Jehovah. One of them is Lucifer. And one of them is Satan. Jehovah is authority, justice, war, power.
Okay.
Lucifer is peace, intelligence, enlightenment, pleasure.
That's it kind of seems a little bit like Hinduism.
Kind of. And then Satan is like passion, rage, instinct, lust.
Krishna. Who'd that?
I don't know how easy it would be to draw direct parallels. But it's actually easier to draw direct parallels between the Gnostic structure to Hinduism than it is to the Process Church.
Yeah.
The Process Church is pretty on its own. But in the middle of all of these, that is an equal part of all of them, is Christ.
Yeah.
The perfect man, right? The Messiah, the ideal human being. is supposed to be representative of all of the best of these things and all of the worst of them, and aware of the best and aware of the worst.
Yeah.
So it's the Process Church is a really interesting organization. They don't really exist anymore because they existed during the Satanic Panic.
Oh.
So they received a lot of hate, a lot of pushback from, I think they were in Britain.
Yeah.
So they got a lot of pushback, and they had to just keep evolving. And then there were a couple schisms, but funny enough, that initial organization that was the Process Church of the Final Judgment, now, over the course of all the mutation that it's had to go through, they're an animal rights group.
I mean, good things come,
Yep.
I guess.
They're a totally, I'm sure that a lot of the core people involved are still really involved in the Process Church systems and structures.
Yeah.
But as far as the group itself is concerned and what they do socially, they are literally just an animal rights group.
That's a church I can get behind.
I do like them. They're a pretty cool group. Interesting though, in drawing direct parallels between religions, it's interesting to think God, the creator, and God, the destroyer, which could be Yahweh and Satan, Azerate. You could easily tie God, the creator, to Vishnu, who creates. Yeah. And you could tie Satan, the destroyer, to Shiva, who destroys. But then you're left in the middle with Brahman, the preserver. Yeah. The thing that exists between both.
Is that why the Brahmin are the spiritual, is it called Brahmin? What am I saying?
So the highest caste in the Hindu caste system for the religious caste, they're called Brahmin.
Okay, that's what I was thinking of.
So Brahma is the god, and then the Brahmin are the
followers of,
Yeah, but Hinduism is one of the world's biggest religions and one of the world's oldest religions. Yeah. So it has as many sects and different groups as you can possibly think of. Yeah. So there are people who think that Vishnu is the highest god, people who think that Brahman is the highest god, people who think that Shiva is the highest god. Yeah. I have studied a lot more of the Shaivists, the people who identify with Shiva, the destroyer, for obvious reasons. But the whole philosophy surrounding a lot of Shaivism have really impacted a lot of my personal beliefs in that, take the heat death of the universe. Yeah. Because we see that everything in reality is decaying. Yeah. It is falling apart, and eventually it all will fall apart, and it will all fall back into nothingness. So I have kind of come to this place where, or not right now necessarily, but previously in my life, I kind of came to this place where I saw, all of reality will eventually fall apart, and we know that scientifically. So Satan wins. The devourer devours everything. Entropy eats the world, and so that was a lot of my scientific reasoning behind being a Satanist, which I didn't really need scientific reasoning. But when I talked to atheists, that was a really easy way to just kind of relate to them. Yeah. And be like, okay, so, I'm a Satanist because, Satan is destruction and hunger and he's going to devour everything. Yeah. But the inevitable heat death of the universe proves that entropy will decay everything. So just think about Satan as entropy. Satan's going to eat everything. Yeah. Entropy's going to eat everything.
To be honest, is a good way to look at it because, instead of seeing it as this, oh no, we have the war for good and evil, and darkness is gonna prevail because this, that, or the other, and it's because I guess I would kind of, if I was thinking that direction, I'd probably be but then what about the little spark of light that comes through, and it's the phoenix born from the ashes, or and you're okay, so is there this weird Taoist or
the cycle?
Yeah, exactly.
I try to divorce myself from good and evil as much as I possibly can. Because when you say order and chaos, everyone associates order with good and chaos with bad, but really order and chaos have nothing to do with good and evil. Good and evil are moralist interpretations. Yeah. And all morality is social lubricant. It's just a thought form structure to try to make society function more easily. Yeah. Because when you tell everyone, oh, it doesn't matter who you kill, then then people are going to, be a lot less likely to be cohesive in a society. I disagree with a lot of other religious people in saying that I don't think morality is truly important, in that I don't think that it's a cosmic law. Well, it's funny enough.
Kind of, you think about nature, so like just the brutality of nature, but it's still like also the most beautiful thing about our physical existence.
Even on the macrocosmic scale, I mean, you'll watch black holes devour everything. Yeah. And that's like celestial violence.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That is this massive, powerful force demanding supplication from everything that surrounds
unrelenting, really. Yeah, you can't.
Yeah. I fucking love it. I think it's badass.
Yeah.
But I also love making the half joke, half definitive statement of black holes are the real bodhisattvas.
Yeah.
Like a bodhisattva is an enlightened person, like a Buddha.
Yeah.
Who still exists.
Yeah, the risen masters.
Yeah, and is just trying to help everyone else become enlightened. Mm-hmm. And like a black hole is to me at least the celestial equivalent of that.
Yeah.
It is a hole in reality. When everyone talks about black holes, they're like, oh, it's not really a hole, because they're thinking in a very 2D perspective.
Yeah.
They're thinking like of a flat plane that has a hole going through it. Like, no, obviously a black hole is not on a flat plane, so it's not a flat plane with a hole going through it. It's a 3-dimensional thing, but it's this void in space, which itself is a void, and it sucks everything into it, and nothing ever emerges from it. It is the gateway from the physical materialized gateway from the material to the beyond. Mm-hmm. And it exists, as far as we know, with absolute permanence.
Yeah.
They're thinking that, even with the heat death of the universe after the last proton decays, there's still going to be black holes, because they're not, and again, we can't detect anything beyond the event horizon, so we can't really know what they are. But the interpretation that I kind of work with on that is they're not a material thing, in that it's not like, here's a...
you can't actually
nothing really goes into it, because it doesn't exist. Yeah. The event horizon is the line around which that hole in reality is drawn.
Yeah, which I think is kind of, where I would, because it's hard to, you're like, okay, so you have this hole, so to speak, but it's like, is it, and everybody's like, it's so dense, like, is it dense because of it's physically there, and it's like compounding everything at all that has ever been brought into it, down to like the tiniest form, or is it literally just a doorway, or a wormhole, so to speak, to just another point in time, another point in...
Yeah, so I think of it kind of like the black hole is a hole in this reality, and it is infinitely dense, because everything beyond the horizon goes to a, not necessarily like a place, but a state of being / non-being that is infinitely dense, because it is all and nothing. Yeah. It is that infinite possibility. It is the endless void that Satanists talk about. Mm-hmm. Whatever exists beyond the event horizon of the black hole, to me, is what peak experience is what God is. But again, we don't know what's beyond the event horizon of a black hole. Yeah. So I can't really know for sure. These are all just kind of assumptions I'm making to like draw lines between dots. But I have fun drawing lines between dots. Yeah. So I'm going to keep doing it.
I feel you, dude. And that's exactly what really what this podcast is about. Just trying to draw those dots between just like the such, I don't know, expansive ideas. And like, the problem is there's too much out there. And like, I have convictions, but like my convictions are so fluid so often that I'm like, what is, like, not my convictions, I should say. I guess my stances on anything really would be so fluid that I'm like, I could never feel safe. Like, this is where I'm putting my foot down, and this is like, where the line is drawn, I guess.
I would say that I am very much the same way, but my convictions are very few, and I hold on to them very tightly until I can get, something better, I guess, because But the thing is, something better, meaning something that supports the true core conviction, which is the work is all there is. So every other conviction I have that surrounds that one is because they support that one. Any one that I find a better replacement for, I will replace it with it, because nothing matters to me more than that one true core conviction, which is the work is all there is. I'm trying to get enlightened in this lifetime. I see all of reality as just a progression from birth to death, as many times as you need to do it in order to break free and move beyond. And if there's another instance of this cyclic existence beyond this reality, fuck it, we'll deal with it when it comes. If I get to experience like true nirvana after this reality, or after however many lifetimes it takes to get there, it is what it is. I'll get there in the end. You know, I'll accept that. But if there's more to learn after this, then there's more to learn after this, and I'm just here for the ride.
Dude, that is one hell of a way to end this podcast too. What a hell of a ride.
I'm just here having fun, man.
Right? And that's what we should really do, because I mean that's half the reason that, I don't know, purpose in life for me is more like, why do I want to do things that are like not conducive to me, or like conducive to like what makes me feel the most whole, I guess. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're just trying to fill a hole.
Exactly.
Well, brother, thanks for coming on.
Of course, man. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Do it again.